Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this roundtable about value chain collaboration to enable the circular economy. My name is Elisa Casazza, and I will be the moderator for today. If we can move to the next slide, I will immediately show you the very rich agenda that we have prepared for you this afternoon. Today, we will indeed ask ourselves why it is needed to collaborate further with customers, consumers, suppliers along the value chain and other partners in order to enable circularity. And to do so, I have a very rich panel of guest speakers. So first of all, we will start with a keynote presentation from Tim Forslund from Sitra, the Finnish Innovation Fund. And then we will hear from instead the practice from people that are currently implementing circular economy, that are currently collaborating with other companies in order to accelerate the transition. And that's why it's a great pleasure for me to introduce today Timohir Premuzak, the General Manager of Vetropack Croatia, Denisha Spencer, Secretary General of Polyolefin Circular Economy Platform, and Dirk Vantigem from Eurotex. So we will hear very different approaches, very different sectors, but with all one objective, how to accelerate the transition to a more circular economy. So now let's see if you can move to the next slide. Before starting, I will just give you a short introduction about my organization, CSR Europe. So CSR Europe is a business network, and together with our corporate members and national partner organizations that you see here on the slide, we try to push the sustainability agenda forward. And if we can then move to the next slide, I can show you that when we speak about sustainability, we really mean a very broad scope of topics and issues. And that's why we organize our work into three different work streams. The first work stream is the one that we call the people work stream. So in this pillar, we have all the projects linked to the employment, the future of work, the lifelong employability. Then we have also a pillar that is maybe the most traditional link to the CSR function, that is what we call the markets. So everything linked to corporate disclosure, both of non-financial information, but also financial. And then finally, there is the materials pillar, that is also my team. And in my team, we deal with supply chain, both from the human rights point of view. So we have projects on due diligence or responsible sourcing of materials, but also on the environmental. And that's why circular economy is really one of our priorities. Now, if we move to the next slide, I can tell you just very briefly a few more words about what we mean for circular economy and when we started working on it. So CSR Europe started working on circular economy in 2016, thanks to a project that was funded by the European Commission under Horizon 2020 that was called R2Pi Transition from Linear to Circular. In this project, we did a number of case studies with companies that are currently transitioning to circularity, and we tried to identify with them their challenges, so what is harming their transition, but also what is enabling the transition. And we did this to eventually be able to develop business guidelines, so business tools to help other companies to transition, and also policy recommendations for the EU policymakers. And now in the next slide, I would like to show you the business models that we analyzed in that project. So what do we mean for circularity? Obviously, there are many definitions of the circular economy. Many organizations use different frameworks. I don't think it's important to look really into the details of how many business models we refer to. What I think is important is to take into consideration the whole life cycle of the product. So really having business models both from more a sustainable production, a sustainable use, maybe so with the product as a service, for instance, and then more sustainable end of cycle. So these are the business model that we studied in that project. And what was interesting is that we saw that for all these business models, what is the real enabler? So what really makes the difference in implementing circular business model within a company is the element of collaboration. Obviously, there are many different shapes, types of collaborations. There are one-to-one collaborations, and that are typically industrial symbiosis, for instance, in which the waste of one company can become the raw materials, the resource for another. But then there are also wider types of collaboration. Vertical collaboration along the value chain, and today we will talk about it with some of our speakers. So when a company starts to collaborate with the suppliers in order to improve the circularity of the whole sector, but also horizontal type of collaboration in which companies collaborate with competitors, so with other important brands of the same sector in order to make a systemic change. So this is a bit the quick introduction of today. So the main question for today is, how can we collaborate better? How can we accelerate this important transition? And in order to start off and kick off the discussion, I'm extremely pleased today to have with us Tim from the Finnish Innovation Fund. Tim is a circular economy specialist. He caught my eye because recently he published a very interesting article on how to use circular economy in order to help the recovery from COVID-19. So I am extremely happy that he accepted our invitation. So I really look forward to hear your presentation about the work that Sitra is doing in Finland, how you are able to really make the country advance in its circularity journey, but also which learnings can we get for other countries and companies as well. So Tim, thank you very much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Let me just start off by saying that I'm really delighted to be part of this discussion. And I look forward to learning many new things today. What I would share with you is from Finland's perspective and from Sitra, where I work. And Sitra is the Finnish Innovation Fund. It's an independent think, do, and connect tank and future house under the Finnish Parliament. We've been around for a bit over 50 years, and our aim is the successful future of Finland. The successful Finland of tomorrow, and the vision is the next era of well-being, a sustainable and fair future. But right now, many of us probably think a little bit differently about that future compared to, say, 8 months ago. Some things have been fast-forwarded by years, whereas other things have been reversed, rather. And I think sense-making is really important right now. But what we do know is that the role of the circular economy has been amplified. And on the next slide, I would say a few words about the role of the circular economy through its role to solve multiple crises at the same time, build resilience, and regenerate our economies. In fact, the circular economy could provide 75,000 jobs just in Finland. And there are large challenges, of course. None has been unaffected by COVID-19. But we have seen that many of the firms in the circular economy have in fact fared better through the crisis, as have the funds with holdings in these firms as well. And this crisis is COVID-19, but there are other crises that have not gone away. And a euro can only be used once, so it should go towards solving as many crises as possible at the same time. And the circular economy can help solve resource scarcity. We have finite resources. Secondly, we've shown in one study that Europe's industry, 50% of the climate mitigation potential could be tackled with the circular economy. It can also help address the 90% of biodiversity loss that is due to resource extraction and processing. Simplified, why we need the circular economy, it can help us solve many of the SDGs. We've shown recently in our reports, it's SDG 8, 9 and 11 to 15. So it's some more than others, but it tackles quite a few of them directly and indirectly. And on the next slide, I would say a few words about what the circular economy actually is. I think that's a good place to start. And I think you have to start also by looking at the problem. And today's economy is one of haste and waste. Most things are used only once and then they're discarded. I saw this morning in a new IUCN report that an estimated 230,000 tons of plastic ends up in the Mediterranean every year. Whereas the circular economy focuses on designing things and systems so that we don't end up with a lot of that waste in the first place. Since most waste is in fact a design flaw. But by learning from nature and through digital solutions, we can avoid a lot of that waste in the first place. And we can get more value from what we already have. And I think this really, it requires that we work across firms, sectors, and whole supply chains. And Elisa just mentioned industrial symbiosis. I think that is one important area. Other solutions I could think of include sensor technology plays an important role, as do new business models, including sharing and as a service business models that help keep things in use. While I think simply finding more convenient ways of meeting our needs, I think that is the beauty of this as well, that it's not just about, it makes business sense, but it's also about meeting actual needs in sometimes just smarter ways. And on the next slide, I would share a little bit about how Finland has started to make this a reality. In 2016, Sitra developed the world's first national circular economy roadmap. And as you can see, it was really a society-wide effort, working together with government, businesses, universities, and the third sector, and of course the people of Finland, without which it would have been, well, very difficult to make this happen. And I think looking at it is really viewing co-creation across different realms as a sort of, as a strength, really. And what it does, this kind of roadmap that Finland developed, is to have this really ambitious vision of what we want, combined with concrete steps of how we can actually make that a reality. And in fact, we just published a guidebook on the whole roadmap process, if you're interested. And I could say, if I could say only one thing, is dare to think big. And on the next slide, I would mention that Finland has already the highest number of circular economy learning offerings in higher education in the world, not just per capita. So you can change the system. And this also applies to politics, businesses, and people. And through our belief that the transition has to take place globally, together, we last month organized the World Circular Economy Forum, which gathered thousands of circular economy enthusiasts from around the world around the topic of sustainable recovery. And now we're indeed beginning to look at the recovery. And without the circular economy, it will be impossible to achieve many of the SDGs and our future biodiversity and climate goals in particular. Therefore, it must be at the heart of building back better. Unfortunately, but a fraction of recovery measures thus far has been sustainable, and of that share, but a fraction has been circular. This is unfortunately a lost opportunity. And on the next slide, I would say a few more things on that and share some thoughts from me and my colleagues. And I think that it's easy to start to look at the recovery, and the pandemic, everything didn't start with the pandemic. In fact, global supply chains, they have started to transform already before 2020, growing more regional and technology intensive. And the role of services has become relatively more important than the trade in goods since 2005. And now we must really leverage the changes from the pandemic to our advantage. And I think in tomorrow's supply chains, longer lasting products should be a no-brainer, as should products that allow for a second life. And in industry, we need to apply more circular thinking across supply chains and also introduce it into existing work like climate roadmaps. And we need to avoid regulatory complexity for firms that have circular solutions like Denmark has done with their one-stop shop. And we need to radically improve our recycling systems, be it glass, plastics, or textiles. And one example I think of is from collection to open source garment to yarn recycling technology. There's an automated process already working in Hong Kong that basically you throw in a pile of different mixed clothes, and at the other end you get out new yarn that is already being used by H&M Foundation. And now we're also seeing this technology in Finland, so there is a lot happening, and I think we need to think of this, like with so many things, jointly. We need to think of recycling and reuse jointly, like they have done in Flanders in Belgium. But we also need to think beyond industry and look at public procurement, circular economy learning, and for everyone, smarter food systems as well. That's one of the biggest drivers of the biggest challenges of both our climate crisis and our biodiversity crisis. And above all, we need to emphasize connections and find synergies across firms, sectors, and systems across the whole world. We need to think big, but also zoom in to think about the parts. And on the final slide, I think we have shown that you can change the system, and now is the time to do it. Thank you for listening. And I hope, don't hesitate if you have any questions, either now or afterwards as well. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Tim. I think it was a very interesting, comprehensive presentation. Thank you for reminding us a bit the why. Why is circular economy important? And the urgency also, and the fact that probably in this building back better, that we heard a lot during the crisis, and we keep hearing, indeed, the sustainability element and the circular economy element is not always at heart. Now I ask to our participants if there is any specific question for you. Otherwise, I will actually like to use the last sentence you have put on your slide. So I showed you how to do it. Now let's do it together, to give the floor to people that are actually doing it, that are busy every day with the objective of accelerating and moving forward in the transition. But we will get back to you if there are any questions during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much, Tim. I really appreciated your introduction. You gave us a good framework and a good context now to continue the discussion. So now, if I can, and if I can ask my colleague Olax to have again the slide. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Timur Tremuzak, that will be the first of our speakers of the panel. So we will now hear more about his experience with the circular economy in Croatia. Tihomir is the general manager of Vetropack Croatia. It's a great pleasure really for me that he accepted my invitation that he is here today. So I look forward to hear more from you about your circular economy journey, and especially the challenges. What are the challenges you are encountering right now in moving forward in your company? So Tihomir, thank you again. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. It's also my great pleasure to be a part of this panel discussion with so important people in circular economy world, social responsibility and sustainability, which are a very important topic of our time, and it's going to be even more important in the future after Corona, with new normal time. So let me start my presentation. Next one, please. Yes, I'm going to show you in a few slides who is Vetropack Group and who is Vetropack Straže. Then I'm gonna show you how we create economic and environmental social added values. Then I'm gonna move my focus to Croatian market, especially to Croatian recycling market and topics and problems in Croatian recycling market. And then which obstacles and challenges are ahead of us in Croatia, and what would be our proposal, how to improve it, how to improve our system, how to participate actually in these improvements. Next slide, please. First of all, I have to say that I discuss with you today on behalf of Vetropack Straže, not on behalf of Vetropack Group. I have mandate to discuss just on behalf of Vetropack Straže, because I'm in charge for business in Croatia for this glass factory in Kumna Sutli on the very border with Slovenia. First of all, I believe that everybody knows that Vetropack is one of the leading glass packaging manufacturers in Europe. On the map, you can see our 8 production locations in 7 countries, and our headquarters in Switzerland, close to Zurich. Vetropack Straže is name of Vetropack Croatian factory, and Vetropack Straže is in charge for Croatian domestic market, but also for all markets on the Balkan area, or let me tell you, ex-Yugoslavia markets. Of course, we do export also to West and other European countries via our intercompany business, but this is our normal procedure. We can go to the next slide. As glass producer, we are a part of circular economy, and you can see on the left part of the slide that glass packaging production and glass packaging value chain is also closed. Closed means from production in our factories, then via markets and usage on the markets. That means with end users who enjoy their life together with our bottles, but who actually have to back these bottles, these used bottles, via collection and recycling system again to our factories, to our production sites, where this used glass could be again put into our production and 100% to be recycled. This is very important. You can see that our products can be indefinitely recycled with no loss of quality. Secondly, we try to improve our environmental balance, especially with our investments, which are always focused how to improve energy efficiency, how to reduce CO2 emissions, generally our waste, improve our footprint. Therefore, we do many things, many improvements in field of energy consumption. Our new investments is very connected with reducing of energy consumption, because this is very connected with better footprint. And of course, you know that our products are very attractive related to health, and we try to do life and we try to give our customers the best solution to enjoy their life and to make their life even more healthy, but also even more nice. You can follow next slide. And now I'm going to move to the concrete part of presentation. Vetropack Straža as Vetropack Croatian factory is via our Vetropack group member of FEVE. FEVE is European Container Glass Federation. I know that everybody knows for FEVE, and our contribution in FEVE is at FEVE's platform is via our group or with our sister companies in Vetropack group. You can see that in 2017, FEVE presented that the recycling ratio of glass in EU countries was 76%. And you can see very big differences among EU countries in collecting ratio or in success of recycling. You can see that, for instance, Finland is 92%, Sweden very close to 100 together with Switzerland, but Croatia is still far below those the best European countries, and this is exactly what I want to point out, that I see big room for improvement of our system in Croatia, collecting system in Croatia, because we are now close to, or we are walking on the line of 50%. You can see on the right side that since 2006 there have been no improvement in collecting ratio, because this curve is actually flat around 50%. This is something what I would like to force. This is something what I would like to change or to see in the next years that will be changed in Croatia, because if one system doesn't show any progress in 14 years, this is obvious for me that in system is something wrong. This is not need. There is no need for big discussion. Actually, for my point of view, this system is wrong, and we have to change the system if we want to achieve these EU targets, EU 2025 and EU targets 2030. Without crucial change of our system, we won't be able to achieve it. And final slide, Elisa, please. And as mentioned before, we see our main issue in our collecting, disposing and collecting system, but not just in Croatia, also in Balkan, all Balkan region, even in other countries is even worse situation. But let me focus to Croatia, and to change this collecting and disposing system is our main challenge. What I mean about that, it's you know, as country who joined most recent to the EU, Croatia took over also European law and guidelines and directives and changed Croatian law according to that. But implementation is the problem. Implementation. That means everything is written, everything looks very nice on the paper, but in the real life we have absolutely different picture. Afterwards, we think, I mean, we private sector, business sector means that market rules have been main driver to improve our system. Not public sector, not politics. Politics and public sector has to be support, but changes have to be market-driven. That means business-driven, and private sector, business sector has many of proposals to present to the government. Then I think that without penalties, we can forget everything. That means, people are very comfortable, and if you just tell them they need to do something, they will do today, but tomorrow they will back to the previous rule. But if you set penalties, then you have chance to change the world, to change the behavior of people. Then investments, especially throughout the EU grants, have to be focused more to the private sector, because private sector has many of actually finished projects. Finished means ready to be implemented, and this money would be much more efficiently used or spent if we implement many of ideas of private sector. And last but not least, of course, to improve awareness, it's the toughest issue, because this is a long-term investment, especially into younger generations, because people in my age are not good material to be changed and to take over new rules and better things. But we have to be focused to the younger generations and to build up their behavior in right way. And with this effort, with this investment into our future, into their future, we can win. Without that, we will lose the game. That's from my side.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think you really delivered a very clear presentation, and I especially like this very strong call that you made for a systemic change at the national level. So this call for implementation and for harmonization also of rules at EU level, but also I like this element you brought of the green investments, the support to investments, and the awareness level. I think these three are very important topics, and I'm sure that we will hear them again coming in the other presentations, and for sure in the panel we will have later on. So thank you very much, Timur. And now I would like instead to give the floor to Venetia Spencer. So we move from one packaging material to another. So it's a pleasure to welcome Venetia Spencer, Secretary General of the Polyolefin Circular Economy Platform, that will tell us more about her organization. It's a collaborative organization, so was really the perfect example for this roundtable, and how you are moving forward the circularity of your sector. So thank you very much for being with us, Venetia, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elisa. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to talk about this, and also to take part in a panel with such a great range of experiences, and particularly appreciated Tim's introductions, which I think set the scene. My focus is a circular economy from a material perspective, but it's really good to look up occasionally and think also about what it really means on the broader picture for all of society and all of the different sectors involved. So perhaps to start by introducing what the Polyolefin Circular Economy Platform is and what we're trying to do. And PCEP is a relatively new organization we launched last year, and it's an organization with a mission to transform our industry, so the industry of our material, from a very efficient linear economic model to a circular economic model. With that, perhaps Elisa, I could have the next slide. So we are, as you said, a collaborative organization, and the mission is indeed this fundamental systems transformation from a linear economy to a circular economy for the material. And the three strategic goals that we collectively identified as the industry for how to do that chime, I think, well with some of the messages we've heard already. So the first is, of course, to design out waste. The second is to make sure that our products and our material is in use for as long as possible. And the third is about making sure you then keep that material at the end of its given use in a material form in the economy. And so that in our case is about recycling the material back into the highest possible quality new raw material. The idea being, of course, to enable materials to stay, as I said, in the material form and to be used as many times as possible before that material degrades to the point where you can no longer derive economic value from it. Perhaps to look at how you do that, such a massive change for a material. And the approach we took, if you'd be so kind as to move to the next slide, is to really say that there is just no way to do this without everybody at the table. Creating a circular economy is a system change. It's not a small goal. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's certainly not something that I think any one company or even any one section of the value chain or the industry or even of society can do alone, right? So in PCEP, we're an industry association. So this diagram talks about bringing together the polyolefin system with a focus on the industrial actors. But of course, it's also about collaboration with society, with civil society, and with the policymakers as a whole. But our membership aims to bring together all the companies that are involved in the circular economy for polyolefins. So the resin producers, the brands and retailers that produce products that are then sold to the consumer, the people in charge of collecting those materials at the end of their life, our recyclers, and of course, converters in the case of polyolefins are the people turning plastic into products. And we also have so everyone else. So there are also lots of other companies who are really important to this: additive suppliers, machinery manufacturers, technology specialists that are innovating to change what we can do. And you need everyone together. I know it's in the panel title, but I can't state that word collaboration strongly enough. If you don't understand the needs and the businesses and what makes a difference to all these other players around your value chain, then you run a really major risk that you take a big decision trying to be sustainable and go more circular, and all you actually do is move the problem around the circle. So unless we all come together and look at how it all interrelates, we can't create systems change. We just tackle the problem in our own backyard. So yeah, perhaps the next slide, please. And to talk about why a polyolefin platform specifically. So polyolefins are a family of plastics. We're not all plastics. We are, however, almost half of all plastic demand in Europe. So a big piece of the plastics use industry here in Europe. You referenced, Elisa, packaging, and indeed, if you look at plastic packaging, polyolefins represent 70% of the plastic packaging market. So it might not be the plastic you've heard of, but it's very much the plastic you're seeing and using in your everyday life. But we're not only in packaging. Actually, polyolefins are very versatile, and they are found in almost every sector of the economy: agriculture, construction, electronics, automotive. Actually, I should probably say, as Dirk is speaking next, these numbers refer to thermoplastics, so they don't include our fibers. So his part of the polyolefin world isn't actually showing here in these figures. But the other critical number here for me is that last one when we're talking about circularity. So if you look at the amount of post-consumer waste, plastic waste collected, and by post-consumer we mean after use. So after you've finished your product's useful life and you've thrown it away, we collect all that plastic. 61% of what was collected last year in Europe was a polyolefin. So very fundamentally, from my perspective, and I think from our industry's perspective, we need to establish a circular economy for polyolefins if we want to see a circular economy for plastics, because we are just, there is a scale there and a weight and therefore a responsibility that will drive and help bring along in partnership all of our colleagues in the broader plastic industry as well. And luckily, in many areas, we also have a lot to learn from our fellow colleagues in plastics. So this is again another aspect of collaboration. Yeah. So if I could move to the next slide, Elisa, thanks. Yeah. So one of the questions I get is, well, how on earth do you drive such a very large industry with so many actors in one direction? And the approach we have taken as the Polyolefin Circular Economy Platform is one of, I think, quite ambitious, immediate voluntary commitments. So our initial pledge that we adopted at the beginning at the end of 2018 was to voluntarily increase the amount of recycled, again, post-consumer polyolefin being used back in product by the equivalent of 167,000 African elephants. Or if you'd like that as a figure, it's an increase of 1 million tons. So our baseline showed that in 2016, there was polyolefin recycled content on the European market of about 2 million tons. And we want to get that to at least 3 million tons by 2025. And there is a lot of action and collaboration involved in that, from collection and sorting to regulatory framework to quality definitions and engagement, all the way through how you really generate that circle for the material. The focus of our commitments here are on the post-consumer waste, because when it comes to post-industrial or industrial waste, actually that circle operates very well. That material is very high quality and it is today already recycled. So our focus in PCEP is how do we deal with the work that needs to be done, which is in the post-consumer space. We have several voluntary commitments also looking a little bit further out at 2030, but this is, perhaps for more information, I'm happy to take questions on what we're doing and where we're focused, either in the Q&A or offline. Annalisa, you asked me specifically if I could highlight some of the challenges for circularity for packaging. So to focus specifically at packaging, there are three that I think are probably the most fundamental and that are issues we are actively working on at PCEP. The first is clearly food contact materials. So I said already that in plastic packaging, 70% of that is a polyolefin. And when you look at the legal framework for food contact use packaging and food contact materials, currently, we don't have very many examples of legally allowed recycled polyolefins back into this market, and it is a major market for us. So clearly, what is a really critical step in the transition is to establish the safe, scientifically valid approach and then the legal framework for getting recycled material back into our food contact market. And in this space, there is a huge amount going on, and actually very pleased to welcome in the European Commission Circular Economy Action Plan the commitment to the reevaluation of the legal framework here. And at PCEP, we're really working on establishing collectively as the value chain the science that how would you evaluate if a recycling technology was producing a safe enough quality material to be used. And there are also lots of really exciting innovations in the space of new recycling technologies that can bring things like chemical recycling that can bring you what are referred to as virgin-like grades. So you can re-establish a food contact grade from a waste input. The next one that I think is really critical, and I've just heard my colleague from Croatia talk about as well, is collection and sorting. So we collect an enormous amount, volume-wise, of polyolefin waste today. I think in 2019 it was about 17.5 million tons. Nearly 70% of that was packaging. So if you're going to look at the material that could change our waste sort of input, waste part of the circular economy fastest, it is going to be in packaging, looking at packaging. But there is a lot we can do to improve how we collect that material and also how we sort it. And these two things are really critical when you're looking at the quality of the recycled material you're getting back out. And I think that it's a really important part of the transition. We need to get hold of all of our waste, and currently there's still quite a gap between what we put on the market as product and what we get back as waste. But the waste we do get back, much more of it needs to first be sorted and sent to a recycling company. And we need to collect it and sort it in such a way that the material is at its optimum format for creating the best quality recycled material. So that was I talked earlier about high quality new raw materials. And there were lots of really exciting developments in this space. I'm sure many of the people listening will have heard about the Holy Grail Consortium, which is looking at digital watermarking technologies, which could completely revolutionize the way we sort packaging waste and enable us to really have much more specific streams of material than we do today. But so lots of good work going on, but a lot to do in this space, and it's a really critical piece. And then, last but definitely not least, there is a real need to ensure that the framework, and that is political and legislative, but that it encourages investment in these new technologies, that it encourages investment in infrastructure and in capacity. And certainly as PCEP, we've called heavily for the recovery fund to be really focused on the circular economy. And it was unfortunate to hear Tim saying that some of this is already a missed opportunity in some of the initial investments, but I think this is critical. We tend to think of Europe as having really well-established infrastructure, but when it comes to how we get hold of our waste and how we ship it within Europe and how we manage it, how we collect it, a lot of the infrastructure is very old, very long-standing, and the focus has not historically been, in plastics at least, on getting hold of that material and getting it to a recycler. And we really need to shift that, and that involves a clear common goal on establishing a framework that enables people to invest in that infrastructure, in that innovation, and in that capacity. So I think specifically for packaging, those would be the three things that I'd call out as areas where we have the most work to do in the transition to the circular economy. But again, actually, if you look across other applications, it's not so different, right? The steps are always the same. Are we designing our materials our products as appropriately as possible to get that maximum reuse, refurbishment, that service economy, again, that Tim talked about? Are we making sure we're only making things we actually need? A very, very fundamental social shift that is not one for PCEP alone, but one for all of us to address. And are we designing them in such a way that our systems can collect them and sort them intelligently with the best kind of consideration of the environmental footprint of that collection process as well, so that we end up with really nice streams of material at scale, so that it's economically sensible to recycle them. One of the things I think we've, if you follow plastics at all, one of the things you've seen in the last year was a massive drop in the prices for virgin material, which really highlighted some of the challenges in today's setup about the economics of recycling. And getting that right is really important. And yeah, sorry, I could talk for hours. I see lots of really good work going on all across Europe and in different areas. And perhaps as a final word, the thing that I have found most motivating, I guess, my rise up and shine moment in this year is that despite the enormous human and economic crisis that has been the COVID pandemic, across my membership, the commitment to the circular economy as the correct long-term strategic evolution of this industry is without doubt. There's been no one backing away from this. This is not sort of, the focus is still absolutely there. And we have a lot to do, but I think that willingness to work together and to innovate together is a huge shift in our industry, and it's the only way to achieve a circular economy. So.
Wow, Venetia, what a presentation. I can go home. You said it all. Very passionate first-hand experience of why we need collaboration and why it is so important to achieve a systemic change, of how difficult it is to transition. And indeed, no company can do it alone. And many things, many keywords you've mentioned that indeed resonate both with the work we do at CSR Europe, but also what Timur has mentioned before. So the need of a better regulatory framework, better collection and sorting, how important this is throughout Europe, across Europe, and the need of green investment. Really Yeah, wonderful presentation. Everything that I wanted to say, but better said from your words. So thank you so much. And we will get back to you during the panel. But I think you actually allow me to make a very smooth transition and a very good transition, because I know that there is also another sector that did not back up due to COVID in their transition to circular economy. And this one is the textile sector. So that's why it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Dirk van Tighem. I hope I am pronouncing correctly your name. Please, otherwise, correct me if I'm wrong. The Director General of Euratex. Euratex is the voice of the European apparel and textile industry. And in this presentation, will tell us more about how you are transitioning to circularity and which are the challenges on your side. So Dirk, thank you for being here, and you can take the floor.
Good. Thank you very much, Elisa, for your introduction, and thank you to CSR Europe for inviting Euratex to join your 4-day conference. A very ambitious program, I must say. I'm impressed by the variety of panels and speakers that you have brought together, that you are bringing together. Very, very interesting. We're obviously happy to join this specific session on circular economy, on circular strategy. As you mentioned, as other speakers have mentioned before, the textile industry is very much a target, or is very much in the focus when discussing circular economy, rightly so. And on that basis, Euratex, representing the European textile and clothing industry, has actually worked quite hard, not just the last few months, but the last few years, in developing a circular strategy which is realistic, which is based on business realities. And that is, I would like to emphasize, very important. If you want to develop a strategy that will work, you need to engage with the entrepreneurs on the ground, because the reality here in Brussels, so to speak, is very different from the reality on the ground. And so what we have done is engaging very closely with our membership across Europe and trying to develop a number of guidelines, try to identify the bottlenecks to move forward in developing a circular strategy. It's very important to, first of all, understand your sector when you are developing a strategy. And on this slide, I try to kind of summarize the essence of our industry. A few comments. First, you will see that when you talk about the textile and clothing industry, is organized across a very specific value chain, starting from the fiber production, the yarns, the fabrics, finished fabrics, going into clothing, but also going into industrial textiles. Each of those segments has its own realities, its own structure, its own technical considerations. So when you try to develop a strategy for an industry, you have to be aware of the different specific technical and regulatory environments linked to each aspect, in our case, of that value chain. Emphasizing that the retail industry is not part of the textile industry per se, is a client of us. But when talking about circularity, of course, we need to engage with the retail industry, and I'll come back to that later on. Second element, talking about the textile industry, textile and clothing industry, it's a very globalized sector. There's a strong, trade figures, import-export, there's strong global competition. So there again, if you want to develop a successful circular strategy, you need to have that global perspective. You cannot agree or engage or set whatever commitments on an island. Europe is not an island, does not operate in an island. So for any strategy to be, again, effective, you have to consider what is the global impact of what we decide here in Europe on the competitiveness of our business in that global context. And the third element when analyzing our sector, our industry, is that the large majority of our business are small companies, small and medium-sized companies. And again, some of you may think of textiles as the big brands that all of you know. In fact, the vast majority of our industry is small business, producing for some of these brands, specialized in very niche markets, technical textiles. Why is that important? Because again, when you want to engage with with small business, talking about circularity, you're talking about kind of a long-term vision, you need to appreciate, you need to understand their ability, their capacity to engage. When I say capacity, I talk about financial capacity, resources, but also technological capacity. So these are elements, characteristics of an industry that you need to appreciate when developing your strategy. Next slide. Before, let's say, engaging a bit more on the strategy, I think it's important to mention, and I think Tim mentioned it as well, what I would say is the elephant in the room today, which of course is the COVID-19 crisis. And we cannot ignore, obviously, the impact of what is currently happening on business, on companies, again, when developing a long-term circular strategy. You cannot disconnect, you cannot ignore what is happening today. I will not go into details on the figures, but you see this minus 50 billion euro. I mean, this is the estimated drop in turnover, sales for the European textile industry in 2020. Minus 50 billion euro, that's around minus 30% of our industry, which is going down in 2020. So we need to appreciate that. We need to consider how that has an impact on making, again, long-term planning. On the next slide, you see it's the same message. This is a kind of reflecting the business confidence across different sectors of the European industry, based on the European Commission analysis. And you can see textiles pretty much at the bottom of the list. So meaning European textile industry and producers are, I would say, even more negative, pessimistic when it comes to their prospects, economic forecasts. So we need to consider that element when developing a strategy. And please, next slide. It's on that basis that when Euratex, again, on behalf of the whole industry, have been working on circular strategy, we see that very much as part of a wider strategy. You know, we have to be careful not to discuss and plan circularity in a kind of a standalone, isolated way. I mean, we will not have our companies on board go along. They face liquidity problems, they face market access problems, they have a lot of, surviving problems, literally. But we need to bring in circularity as a long-term source of competitiveness, but provided it fits within a wider recovery strategy. Next, please. Now, this is, I think, very important to emphasize this kind of context, because again, we need, for any strategy to be successful, it has to be based on reality, on the reality on the ground, and that's why I wanted to emphasize this kind of context. Now, focusing on the textile strategy, I think all of you know this slide. You all know about the Green Deal. You know that there is a Circular Economy Action Plan that was adopted earlier this year. And as some of you may know, what is in the making, what is in the planning from the European Commission perspective, is to come out with a circular textile strategy next year. So obviously, we need to be prepared, so to speak. We need to work closely hand in hand with the European Commission in developing that textile strategy. Next slide. Is it a surprise that textiles is somehow in the picture? Obviously not. And Venetia, you referred to it. I think all the speakers as well. Yes, textiles industry has a certain history that we need to consider. and there's all kinds of figures and rankings and slogans about, you know, who is the most polluting sector of the industry. I will not go into, you know, discussion about, you know, whether the figures are right or wrong. Or the point is to emphasize that European textile industry does recognize that something needs to be done, and is willing to engage in that process. So certainly speaking as Eurotex on behalf of the industry, this is not looking away, this is not denying, this is not you know, ignoring the challenge. The challenge is there, and on that basis, it's very much looking forward on how can we develop a realistic strategy that makes a difference. Next slide, please. So, as I said, we didn't wait for the European Commission to launch the Circular Economy Action Plan. We actually started working on this way back, way before personally I joined Eurotex, and we have presented already last year our own circular textile strategy, which is again very much based on very close and direct conversation with the industry on the ground. Our bottom line is to say we want to be proactive as an industry, so not, I would dare to say, wait for the European Union or the Parliament, whoever, to impose certain rules and regulations, but try to think from an industry perspective, what are the constructive, realistic proposals that we can put on the table, and engage with concrete actions and proposals. Next slide. I will not take you through the full strategy. It is available on our website, eurotex.eu. But I just want to pick that one slide here because I think it in a way it summarized the essence of what we think is necessary to be successful. And interesting enough, Venetia, when I was looking at your slide, I see very similar kind of setup or a similar list of items there. So that's good it's always reassuring to see that we have the same message. These are 12, as indicated here, 12 what we think are essential elements that need to be addressed to have a successful circular strategy in textiles. And I insist, each one of them alone is not enough to be successful. I know again in the Brussels bubble we tend to focus on, I don't know, for example, today there's a big discussion on the eco-design directive. We have big discussions on green public procurement. Each of those individual points alone will not do the job. So we need to really have a comprehensive, coherent strategy where each of those elements are integrated. So when you talk about product design, we need to obviously look into the whole eco-design, recycling of products. We need to address consumer demand, consumer behavior. We need to address the standards. Today, we still don't have kind of integrated, established standards across Europe. We need to look at national barriers which still exist. So we don't have yet an internal market for waste products across the European Union, and. So the point is to say, when we want to be successful, we need to address each of those elements and working together. And in doing that, we cannot be successful by working just on our own. And that's my next slide, and I think most important element. We need to make alliances. Obviously, as producers, we take a lot of responsibility with this plan, with these concrete proposals that we are making, but we need to engage. We need to engage with the consumers, talking about consumer behavior around clothing products, obviously. With the policymakers, it's clear. With the retailers, the big brands need to be on board. The media have a very important role to play as well. The NGO community, important role. The research community, when talking about innovation, identifying technical solutions for recycling challenges that have been mentioned before. So just my main point is that developing a circular strategy that can work, that will make a difference, must be based on a wide range of topics that needs to be addressed. So it's not like a one trick that will do the job. We need to work together, and therefore we need to have those different stakeholders on board. And that's very much our strategy as Eurotex. We are reaching out. We are entering into different alliances within the industry, and certainly available and willing to cooperate even beyond the textile industry, because, as it was mentioned before, we should not just look vertically within our industry, we should also look horizontally across different industry. And so this is certainly an open kind of invitation to the colleagues in the panel and participants more widely to engage with us and develop a circular strategy that can make a difference for our industry. Thank you.
No, thanks to you, Dirk. I think it was very interesting, and I've learned a lot from this presentation. Among the many interesting aspects you highlighted, I think that my main takeaways are probably the need of this holistic approach. I think indeed sometimes in Brussels we tend to forget this. We tend to think that there is one magic solution that will fix the problem and will allow the whole sector to transition. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, if I can allow myself and take the liberty to say. So they need really to work on multiple aspects, the eco-design, consumers' demand. I actually have organized an event on Monday, indeed only on consumer demand and circular consumption. So I know that is a very, very important topic where I think we need to work more. The importance of standards, the internal market for waste, also that I think we could organize a webinar only on this topic, because all of these are very essential elements, and that this call to work together to engage all the actors that can have an impact. So indeed the consumers, the policymakers, the media, the research, the civil society, the actors of your value chain, but also cross-sectorial. This is really what we are also trying to do at CSR Europe on other sectors, but in general on circular economy. So I think it's a very important reminder that you gave us today. So with this, we conclude our first round of presentation, but the event is not over yet, because I would like to ask you some follow-up questions. My questions are mostly about the collaboration aspect, because this is the topic for today. So I would like to ask all of you, how can further collaboration along the value chain accelerate the transition in your sector? And what are the main obstacles of this collaboration? And I know that we have already touched upon, of course, this topic, but maybe this is an opportunity to clarify this element a little bit further. So if now, maybe we can follow the same order that we had for the presentation. So to have Tihomir first, then Venetia, then Dirk, would that be okay for you? Good.
That's fine.
Tihomir, what is from your perspective, so from the glass sector, why it is important to accelerate the collaboration and what are the challenges of this?
First of all, I would like to congratulate my colleagues Venetia and Dirk for very nice presentations. I really was enjoying to hear your approach from your sectors to the circular economy, and I have learned a lot from your presentation. Thank you very much. I'm very happy because I noticed more times word collaboration together. We have to be aligned. We have to act frank. This is actually what I mean. Without frank collaboration among sector or between two sectors or among more sectors, this is no chance to change the world, because if we are talking about circular economy, we are talking about new philosophy, new lifestyle, new life approach. And therefore, I'm very happy to hear from everybody, for all of you, that all stakeholders must be involved into these changes. Without frank support from everybody, we cannot do anything, and we cannot implement circular economy in the next time. If we go deeper into the Croatia side, what I already mentioned, it's needed, or it's crucial, this cooperation and collaboration between lawmakers, between beverage and food producers, between us as glass producers, glass packaging producers, but also from end users, especially younger generations. And if we act all together, then we can change the world, then we can change our behavior, then we can change younger generation, and then we can change and make our future better. Without that, without frank collaboration, there is no chance to do anything.
Thank you, Timo.
If we go just about obstacles, then I think we have to change mindset. We already also, some of you mentioned that that people are a priori against new things. People like their comfortability, their comfort, and they don't want to go out of their comfort zone. And to change this comfort zone, their comfort zone is actually to change their mindset. They need to act and think differently, and therefore is very crucial this circle, or this collaboration between lawmakers, producers, and also public sector, especially local public sector, which actually have support many of actions in collecting system, which is again related with our recycling problems in Croatia.
Thank you very much, Timo. Collaboration to change mindset. I really liked
exactly. And frank collaboration. We have to be honest, without this 100% honest approach, everything is we just lying ourselves.
True. So honest collaboration. Venetia, do you agree with this comment? Do we need honest collaboration? And maybe since you already are managing a collaboration, what are your challenges in the implementation? Maybe this honesty makes me think about lack of trust. Can this be something relevant, or am I wrong in thinking about these things?
No, I would absolutely agree with Timo. I think frankness is a huge part of the mindset change that's required. And actually, in my notes, thinking about that question, I think mindset was a critical word for me, because obviously with PCEP, what we've done is establish a forum for collaboration. But unless everyone in that forum has also shifted their mindset from a very, what is, to be honest, in plastics, I'm sure it's true in other industries, a very competitive industry, to switch from being, you are not only sitting around the table, my members are not only sitting around the table with their competitors, they're sitting with their customers, their suppliers, their competitors' customers and suppliers, and companies they didn't even ever interact with, maybe even just 2 years ago. So yes, I think trust is hugely important, and that is built for me on honesty and openness. But yeah, that switch, that switch from being competitive to collaborative is not just a word; it's a very fundamental shift for businesses, but perhaps more so than any other segment in society. The other challenge, I think, the sort of, I don't really like the word obstacle, but probably one of the other real obstacles we've got in many respects is actually just how complex the landscape is. So there is what I think is an absolute wonderful commitment across the board to changing the world to a circular economy. But what it has generated is a hugely complex landscape of policy, regulation, industry standards, initiatives, and possibly the creation of PCEP is adding to that complexity. But we have to look at how it all, we all need very quickly to get a very accurate understanding of what the world actually looks like and where some of those initiatives and policies are helping the drive to circular economy and where some of them are actually conflicting. So I think everything being done is being done with good intent, right? But I mean, there were some madnesses in, if I just look at industry standards, which of course we write for ourselves, right, as industry standards. To give you an example, when it comes to using recycled polyolefin in a pipe, the rules are different in Belgium and the Netherlands. So if you are laying a pipe, like say to channel sewage or water for across Europe, you can use recycled content in the length of your pipe that's in one country, but you cross an invisible border and you can't use it in the next. I mean, that kind of stuff is madness and needs unpicking. But it's also really important on a policy and legislative framework. So, how we collect and sort is very different within countries, let alone across Europe. It's almost mind-boggling some of the differences and the complexity there. And I think that's definitely a challenge for us. I don't think it's one that's insurmountable in any way, but it does involve a really accurate understanding of a lot of situations that most people haven't previously had to consider for their businesses. And so I think that's an element. And I think to come back to something Tim said in the keynote about haste and our modern society, haste and waste, which I loved, not least because it rhymes. But it is absolutely true. Our current kind of social thinking here in Europe is very much consumption-based and convenience-based, and about just the pace at which we live is slightly mad. And I think when it comes to making the transition, we need to be very careful not to let haste get in the way. That, it's really important to make this change as quickly as we can, not least if we're going to have the slightest chance of being a climate neutral continent by 2050, right? This is very fundamentally linked to the decarbonization agenda. But we need to make sure we do it in a considered way, that we don't create unintended consequences and more complexity and effectively trip ourselves up. So coherence is really critical. And then I think the third one that I think is just really, it's just a reality for everyone is time, right? There is so much going on. I mean, all businesses, all people are facing, massive upheaval in this year for COVID, but for other reasons as well. And finding the time to manage to do this thinking for ourselves and the collaboration required to share that thinking and work together is, I think, really, really important. We have to find ways to carve out the spaces and the time to share the information, to share the knowledge, and to find win-win solutions. So we don't just have massive losers and a few winners, that we have a great social kind of transformation.
Indeed, very challenging though.
Small job, it's okay.
Very challenging though, but I completely agree with what you just said. Dirk, from your perspective instead, so from your sector, what is why collaboration is important? I think this you already mentioned it in your presentation, but what are the main challenges from your view?
I think maybe let me add two elements in that discussion onto those questions. One, it's about governance. As Venetia was just saying, there is so much happening, so many legislative initiatives by the Commission, different DGs. And sometimes it's like, where's the coherence? Where, how does it all fit together? So how do we govern this kind of broad strategy? We've been proposing to the Commission to establish a textile alliance. And okay, it's fancy words, textile alliance, but it would be a way to bring together the different stakeholders, engage holistically, if you want, with the European Union and other, all the stakeholders, players, to take that kind of broad perspective, look at the different specific pieces of legislation or strategies that are coming on the table, and make sure we have the same understanding and make sure that it all goes in the same direction, so that one initiative is not taking us to the left, so to speak, and the other one is going to the right. So having an alliance, or whatever you want to call it, I'm careful because I know also in the past, I've been too many years in the Brussels bubble. I know they launched these big alliances and big words, which end up in, talk shops. So it's not easy to make them effective, but we do need something like that, where again the stakeholders can come together, because there was simply too much happening. I mean, we today have, on top of my head, I think around 13 pieces of legislation that are directly or indirectly connected with circular economy that need to be addressed. So how do we, keep the coordination within our industry and with all those stakeholders, as we said before, that need to engage? So some kind of textile alliance is something we've been proposing actually to the Commission to work on. And my second, let's say, maybe example is of working together. If you have, if you work on a specific project, on a specific kind of target across different stakeholders, it certainly helps the cooperation. And here I want to bring one concrete example. As part of our circular strategy, we've been working to propose the building of recycling hubs, textile recycling hubs across Europe, as a very important investment that would need to take place across Europe. And in developing that concept, we have reached out to other stakeholders, whether it's individual companies, retailers, the industry, the policymakers. And because we have that focus on how can we, in a realistic way, develop that concept of physically building recycling plants. What are the technical challenges? What are the regulatory challenges? The logistic issues? It helps to focus, because you have a common kind of project. You have a common kind of ambition. Let's try to build recycling hubs across Europe, and that certainly helps to enhance the collaboration, because you have a kind of a joint, clear focus in what you do. So the two are a bit maybe, well, in a way complementary. On the one hand, you need holistically governance through some kind of textile alliance. That's what you'd like to have. At the same time, for specific focused projects, you need to, create ad hoc groups where the relevant stakeholders come together and work together, and that seems to be working quite well in our case.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and this actually, especially your first point about governance, links up very nicely to my next question, that is the one about the challenges regarding the policy makers. But on this, since we have already mentioned it, I will ask all of you to make a very short statement, because also I see that there is an interesting question in the chat from a participant that I would like to address. So if we can just do a short round about clarifying what do you need from the policymakers at EU and local level. So one key ask from each of you, and then we reply quickly to this question from the participant. Tihomir, do you want to try first? What do you need from your, I guess, national policymakers mostly?
Yeah, first of all, we need clear directions from EU, what are more or less clear. But then we need also very or good mutual dialogue with our local authorities and their commitment, our commitment, how to make changes. And what is also very important for Croatia, for instance, we need to use best practice. Why do we need to discover again hot water? We don't need it. We have to just look collecting systems in countries which achieve great results, like Finland, like Switzerland, like Germany, like others. Why do we need to create own systems which are automatically or are not efficient enough? We have to take best practice, respect best practice from better countries and from better sectors.
Best practices and better implementation. This is what I take from you.
Absolutely.
From your side instead,
I asked many times my authorities, my ministries, why do we think about how to change things? Just look to the most efficient countries.
Let's call back ask him to speak with your national authorities. I'm sure he can bring experience from Finland. Venetia, from your side, one policy ask.
Oh God, one. Okay. I think if it has to be one, Elisa, I would really say actually that dialogue, connecting that coherence between local, national, and EU. Because what I would love to see is a European circular economy, not 27 national ones or even more regional ones, right? That from a material flow perspective, scale is critical. And so I think working together, collaboration, and bringing that local, and a lot of these decisions are very local, like municipality level policies, into the debate to be coherent with each other, with neighbors, and at the European level is really important.
Very good. Policy coherence. That's what I take. And then let's finish with Dirk. From one.
I was about to say coherence, but so Venetia, you took that. Very good. Very happy.
Sorry.
No, that's fine, because that I can add something else then, because I only have one, which we haven't touched upon, is effective implementation of legislation. Sometimes we're not always happy with whatever rules or laws established by Europe, but if they are adopted, we need to make sure that they are effectively implemented by our companies, clearly, but also by obviously competitors around the globe. So the effective monitoring on the effective implementation and control of legislation, I'm referring to chemical legislation and other standards, is crucially important. Thank you.
Indeed, I perfectly agree with you. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Too many things to say, too little time. I just see one question that I would like to address from the participant. Is a question about collaboration versus competition. So perhaps, Venetia, you could, I think it was related to your presentation, so maybe you can give it a go. The question says, do you see sustainability or circularity becoming a competitive advantage for some front runners? And does that help the sector forward or not? So I think this would be mostly for you, Venetia, and for Dirk from the tech side.
Sure. So yeah, indeed, I think it's absolutely clear that sustainability and circularity is a competitive advantage if you can be a front runner. And again, I think in lots of the presentations, there's increasingly more evidence to back that up. And of course, having front runners does help drive the industry forward, absolutely. Where I talked about the mindset from competitive to collaborative, and of course, as an association in full compliance with competition law, we can only work on pre-competitive issues. But that mindset to be able to share what you have learned and not have everyone have to learn it over and over again individually, that shift from competition to collaboration is what I was really alluding to. Clearly, those companies that get there first will have an advantage and will help bring the standards forward, as does, in fact, the legal framework. That's what it does, right? It pushes the framework forward and it brings the slow movers up to speed. So absolutely an advantage. What I think is now critical is to think about how much of your advantage, how much of what you learned can you share to make the to bring your fellow partners with you as fast as possible.
Thank you very much. Then, Dirk, would you like to add anything on this aspect?
I would answer the question. I would say it can be a competitive advantage, meaning there are conditions for circularity to be a source of competitiveness, and it's linked to what we discussed before, referring to the level playing field, referring to the cost of circularity, referring to the market when talking about clothing products, for example. Is there a market for circular clothing products, for example? How can we develop that market? So again, it can be if there's a number of ifs or a number of buts that need to be addressed. And obviously, I just want to emphasize, as Eurotex, we want to make sure that those ifs and buts become a reality, so that in the end, our European companies or European industry, indeed, based on circularity, can become or can remain, in some cases, a global competitive, sector across the globe.
Indeed, I think it's always good indeed to remind that this is a very complex issue and there are challenges that we're all trying to overcome together. So maybe this can be our final message, actually, also because we are really running late. So I have to move forward my concluding remarks. I think it would be impossible for me to really summarize everything that we have said, because it was way too rich. And there is so much still to do and to work that we could continue for hours. So I just would like to thank you all very much for your presentation. It has been an extremely interesting event for me to moderate, and I hope also for our participants to attend. So thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to Tim. Thank you to Timur, to Venetia, to Dirk for your presentation. It has been incredibly interesting for me to learn more from you. This will be my last event from the SDG Summit. Today was the Circular Economy Day. We had the presentation today. We had the plenary this morning together with GISTIC, but many, many more events are on our platform, because before Dirk, you mentioned it's a 4-day event. I have to correct you, it's a 5-day event. So even on Friday, we will have more and more topics. Tomorrow is due diligence day, so more events on that aspect that is also connected to the use of raw materials and the circularity. So everything in reality is connected when it comes to sustainability. So tomorrow due diligence, and then on Friday we will speak instead about the future of work and the importance of improving the HR and bringing our employees with us in the transition. So thank you again. I hope I found this session interesting, at least as interesting as I found it. I thank you again all for your time, and for any question, please do not hesitate to contact me at my email address, that is ec@csreurope.org. So thank you all and have a very good end of the day.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.